This is a second grade unit that focuses on plants and pollination. To begin, we looked at the lessons we would cover. We looked at standards, learning targets, assessments, barriers, actions to reduce barriers, and we started with the teacher outline. Within each of the sections, we looked at the standards and the learning targets, but we also focused heavily on the barriers. And then we took some time to talk about what would be the best way to reduce those barriers. And we also were reflective on what has worked and not worked in the past. Within pre-lesson 1, students have already studied plants in previous grades, so in order to recruit higher interest levels, we made a point to connect the agricultural world to their world from the onset of the unit. We discussed the many fields that the agricultural businesses hold and how many of them are connected directly to it. In pre-lesson 2, we recreated an investigating what plants need to grow observation form for the students. This allowed them to draw or sketch their observations as opposed to only showing this in written form. This allowed some of our students that struggle with writing concepts and vocabulary to display their learning in another method. Parts of a plant was a key concept in this unit so that students could discuss and show the functions of a plant. Again, this is not new information, so in order to continue to provide background while also recruiting interest, we created a variety of resources for students to explore independently. These links and resources are also available to students in Canvas. In EIE lessons 1, 2, and pre-lesson 3, the pollination system is a central part of the unit. The system is shown to students in video form, in a PowerPoint form, and then we also did a Cheeto experiment where students get hands-on learning experience that involves them in the pollination process. Again, students are given a variety of modes to the information so that they can all access it and be engaged. Students were given the resources to explore the process. We discussed the process and then demonstrated it through the Cheeto experiment. Seeing as this is a core concept, we wanted our assessment to be flexible and telling of what students know. So in order to do that, we aim to reduce the barriers that existed, such as lack of engagement, writing skills, as well as endurance. Students were given and were explained the rubric for the assessment. As a class, we discussed the rubric and what it meant and how we can use it to improve our learning. Students were then asked to create a Flipgrid, which is a short video where they could demonstrate their learning and understanding. In the video, some students showed drawings of the steps of pollination process, some wrote out the process, and others explained it. There were a variety of ways students showed their understanding through offering multimedia for communication. So within the Flipgrid, students were able to access our class. They knew to go to pollination and to use the green button as a way to record themselves, as well as if they weren't happy with it, they could go back and redo it. In lesson 3, students were asked to work collaboratively to test out materials that would make good pollinators. Before we started, we set clear expectations for their collaborative work. The class came up with sentence starters that they could use that would foster positive peer interactions. Students were given a prediction sheet to set the purpose for their experiment. This was also reflected upon and used as a reflection piece throughout their activity. In lesson 4, we had students apply what they had learned so far. Students were given a variety of materials to create a flower with, again, to optimize relevant information, the goal, and to make it a real life situation. Students were able to view a Flowers of Wisconsin PowerPoint. The PowerPoint was also posted in Canvas so that students could refer to that during the creation process. Students were given a checklist as to what we wanted their flowers to include. However, it was not, nor was it intended to be a how-to. Our goal was to give students the opportunity to design and explore those concepts on their own. So to go along with that, we also had them create a hand pollinator. This was a focal point of the unit and a spot where students were very self-reflective in their creations. Students were asked to take their observations and notes from the pollination process and use that knowledge of materials to create their own hand pollinator that could then pollinate one of their homemade Wisconsin flowers. This was a highly reflective piece for the whole class. They asked themselves, did I create a functional pollinator? Did I use learning that I had previously learned? Did I meet the goal? Did I use the resources available to me to help improve my learning? Was I reflective in my learning? Questions like that. When looking through this unit, it was important to note that prior to planning each lesson, barriers were listed and taken into account, materials were looked at critically, and many were recreated to better address the standards and to provide a more flexible learning experience. Our goal is to begin to create environments where learners seek out their resources that best meet their needs. Many of these learning techniques and tools were new to both the teachers and students, but were definitely highly engaging. As students become more aware of what they need as learners and are more familiar with the tools around them, we hope to build more student-driven units that build upon becoming an expert learner. So once we were finished with this piece of it, we then took that and we put the pieces into Canvas. Students knew to enter through their dashboard, but as a teacher, you can go ahead and just enter in the modules. Within the modules, everything that students specifically needed were listed, and as they were ready to use it, then the green buttons were marked. Nothing was put out there before we talked about it. Students were able to access the Canvas page as they needed. Everything that was necessary for that day was posted. Anything that they needed for reflective pieces was also available to them throughout the whole unit. As we went, we made sure also that if they needed things read to them, that Read Write Google was available to them. We had pictures available. We made sure that all of the PowerPoints with the explanations were available through Canvas as well. The entire process took some time, but it was definitely eye-opening for us as teachers. And it also gave us a very reflective piece so that we were sure to touch on all of the needs that students would have in order to be active and engaged learners through the whole process.